My name is Clifford Thompson, and I'm presently a teacher in Richmond, California at King Elementary School. I teach fifth grade. I actually selected King after being placed at El Cerrito Elementary School, Harding, and I selected King because it would allow me to utilize what I feel are the skills that I've developed over the years as a classroom teacher and administrator, and one who's gone back to the classroom, so I could work with Black and Brown children.
And you are currently you're on the Oakland School Board, is that correct?
Yes, indeed. And thank you very kindly, Mr. Nickelson, because you're one of my supporters who helped me actually ascend to the seat of the Oakland Unified School District Board of Education. And I represent District 7, which is in East Oakland. And East Oakland is comprised basically of Black and Brown students. So I'm 100% virtual right now with all of my students, all of my fifth grade students.
And how big is your class right now?
I have 28 students in my classroom, but I'm mainstreaming one child who is actually in special education, but he spends his entire day with me. So we're trying to help him make that transition from a special education classroom into a gen ed classroom.
Wow.
So I have 29 students in essence.
You've spent most of your career teaching in person, as most teachers have. So I guess, what has been the biggest challenge for you in adjusting to being a full-time virtual teacher?
You know, again, I think it's extending the various ways that I can actually teach, like the pedagogical things that I need to do. So because of the virtual classroom, I can't do the extra things that I would normally do if I were in the classroom, like the group work, like the extended conversations, allowing kids to be creative and come up with their own way of expressing a specific idea. So that's the biggest challenge. At one time, I thought the challenge would be having kids show up, but I have a pretty good attendance rate. I have almost 100% attendance, anywhere from 95 to 100%, probably every day. And a lot of it, and I know you didn't ask this specifically, but a lot of it, I think I attribute it to the fact that I use an affirmation every morning. I did that in my classroom when we were physically together. I did it every morning. Well, I've kind of adapted the affirmation a little bit because it's a lot shorter, number one. And it's really catered toward kids understanding that even though we're in this virtual learning situation, they're going to always do their best. So and that's an actual line in the affirmation, I did my best. So I do that affirmation with them so that they understand that even though we're in this virtual learning situation, as long as they're doing their best, even though they might, have a difficulty with connectivity, et cetera. So as long as they're doing their best, I'm satisfied.
I know from you as a classroom teacher that class culture was always so important to you.
Yes.
Do you feel like you've been able to create that even virtually?
I think I have, and I'm glad you mentioned class culture, because my 5 pillars are relationship, culture, communication, consistency, and structure. And so even though we have a virtual setting, I still embrace those 5 pillars. And because I sort of reflect on those every single day to make sure that I am actually living up to those 5. I think it has helped to create an environment, even though we're virtual, that kids understand that we are in this together as a group. So ownership, I think, has resulted as through this entire process.
I know that was so. Watching you work in the classroom, that was one of the biggest things I always took away from that, was that you made sure that all the kids knew yes, they had to do the work, but not just because you were some like dictatorial, like, you're going to do what I say. It was because you knew what they could do. You were holding them to it. And I think I would watch as those first couple of weeks, the kids would be like, they would push back and then they would stop, because it was really all of them. It was quite remarkable. So the fact that you're still trying to do that virtually when I know how hard that is, I think, so commendable.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nickelson. I really appreciate it.
What have been the tools that have been most useful or helpful doing distance learning? What's been most effective?
Um, of course, understanding the technology. That's one thing, because if you don't have that, then there's always a disconnect between you and your students. So it took me a while to get there because it was a learning curve, and I had to learn all of the technology and stuff. And so now that I have that pretty much in place, then understanding how to engage students, period, but then understanding the complication of engaging them over the computer electronically. So those are the kinds of things that I've talked, that I have been thinking about, how to make the engagement happen, even though I'm not there. So I go back to the affirmation that I do. I start each morning with the affirmation to let them know that I, their teacher, Dr. Thompson, really understand what's going on. But again, I'm not going to let you just do a little bit. I want you to do your best, whatever that is. And so I think the kids have inculcated that. And so they know now that, this is what I am holding them to. And so, oh boy. Yeah. So I think bringing in the information from the affirmation, like I told you, holding up the 5 pillars that I believe in, having adjusted to and learned the technology, making sure that there is insistence and I want you to do this. And even if it's not perfect, just do your best at it. All of those things help, I think, help the students understand that it's a real situation that they're in. And even though we're not in person having that conversation, there still is an expectation that it take place. And so the kids are doing it.
What do you think if you could give one message to administrators, to principals about what teachers need right now, or what students need right now, what would that priority thing be? What should they be focusing on, in your opinion? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, it's a really big question. I would say participation, making sure the kids participate. Now I know that's a tall order, but I think even in this environment, we need to have kids participate. You can't give up and say, oh, because of this thing called virtual learning, kids don't have to participate. No, because as an administrator, I think about the long term. That is one whole year of being on the computer. If you don't have kids participate, that's one whole year that's lost. And that's what really concerns me and bothers me, because if teachers have not embraced that concept, then again, and I'm going back to something we mentioned earlier, then again, teachers will say, okay, well, that's okay because we're doing virtual. No, it's not okay because we're doing virtual learning that you let kids off. No, you want kids to participate. So I guess if I were an administrator right now, the one thing that I would tell administrators is you need, and I hope this doesn't sound too bad, but you need to pop in classes every single day. I believe in popping in classes when you're in person. I believe it right now. So I made sure I gave my principal my link so that she could pop into my class anytime she wanted to. I made it easy for not only the principal, I made it easy for the special ed teacher, the RSP. I tried to put it out there for several people. Just drop in, see what's going on, drop in. If you have a question, drop in. If you want to make a comment, whatever, because excuse me, we cannot lower our expectation just because we're in a different setting. So I would say participation.
You are, as I said at the beginning, and you talked about at the beginning, are on the Oakland School Board.
Yes.
What is that job like right now? What is the board focused on right now in this situation?
You know, because Oakland is not unique, really, in the sense that they're trying to deal with the physical solvency of the district. That, I have to be honest, that's one thing that we're dealing with. Also, we're dealing with the union and the staff and the MOU for reopening of school. So that's complicated because you have not only your bargaining unit dealing with that and the staff at the school, but you're also looking at the county and then also the state, then on top of that, the national. So all of those ideas are, well, that's one thing I know that we're really dealing with. And then the third thing is, on a personal level, I am looking at the availability of quality education for all students. And especially since my district is Black and brown, I want to make sure that there's quality education for our Black and brown students.
Last is, do you have a moment from the past month or anything in your classroom, your virtual classroom, that has made you laugh or brought you joy? Anything you can think of?
Yeah. Yeah. My to be honest, several of my kids like to keep their cameras on, and you can see they're so happy. They're just dancing around, and that has brought me the most joy to see that the kids are being kids and they're not allowing all of this negative stuff to totally down them. It gives me so much joy. It really does.
It is interesting to note that obviously the situation is not ideal. We wish we were all in person, but when there's an element of they're no longer surrounded by all their peers, there's no longer like maybe that judgment or the kind of the fighting that can get set off. There is, I've noticed that too. There are students who, at least emotionally, seem to be are much more able to regulate, and it's interesting. It's really interesting to see.
It really is. And I'm sure it brings both of us tremendous joy to see kids who are able to say, hey, here I am.